From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How are you today, Joelle?
Yeah, I'm all right. Had my week away in Bali, which was nice and relaxing. I got through 3.5 books.
Yep. And how many tattoos did you get?
0.
0.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, right? I think for a lot of the people who are tuning in from international, like Canada, US, UK, they're probably thinking about Bali being this really magical, tropical destination. But really for Australians, it's not, is it?
It's definitely tropical.
It's tropical.
Yeah, it's tropical.
But it's not glamorous, you wouldn't say.
No, I mean, look, the resort that we stayed at was really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of different pool areas. They have like kids activities, all kinds of stuff, a number of different restaurants, that sort of thing. But yeah, definitely, you know, when you step outside of the resort, it's absolutely still very much a developing country. They rely very heavily on tourism, and it is just, a lot of the time, you know, you're walking down the streets and it's just full of people with stalls of stuff trying to sell you stuff.
Yeah, it's very contrasting, isn't it? You're in these really nice, opulent resorts, and then you walk outside and it's like a third world country.
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. The international perception of Bali versus our kind of backyard, like, let's just go there to have a holiday.
It's you know, there's plenty of other, you know, international equivalents that it's just to do with proximity, right? So, like, if you're in the US, it's probably Mexico would be a similar kind of a destination. Portugal probably for the UK, you know, that sort of thing. So there are always equivalents, I guess. So I think it's just more probably the accessibility that makes something seem more desirable. Perhaps because, you know, it costs a lot more if you're in the UK to get to Bali than it does if you're in Perth, where it's a 3-hour flight. Yeah,
it's actually cheaper to get to Bali than it is to Sydney from Perth. So
there was one of our taxi drivers was saying his brother lived in Sydney. I was like, oh yeah, it takes us longer to get to Sydney than it does to get to Bali, which he thought was hilarious.
Yeah, it's actually just as long going through customs, I think, in all the getting to the airport and doing all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty quick actually now with the smart gates and stuff.
Yeah, but you have to get there earlier.
Yeah,
for international flights.
3 hours early.
Yeah. Boo. Anyway, look, we.
This is not a holiday podcast.
No, we could do a holiday podcast.
We could we?
Well, we don't have a lot of time.
No.
If we had more time.
I mean, I'm happy for Flourish DX to finance me to take vacations around the world and then record a podcast about it.
No, but if we did do a podcast on that, we could say it is actually a tax write-off then, right?
If you say so.
I don't know. I'll run it past our CFO. And
we'll float it with Dan. I mean, look, I feel like if there's any way to get Dan to approve travel, it would be for vacations like that.
Listeners, if you want Joelle and I to start doing a travel podcast where Flourish DX funds it.
As long as we don't have to go to the same place together.
Yeah, that would, yeah.
That wouldn't be great.
No, yeah, I go on holiday, get away from you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in my bathers in front of you.
No, I don't want to see that either.
No, you don't. No.
But no, if you want a travel podcast where Joelle and I travel to different...
Separately
to different locations around the world and report back on it, email Dan...
at flourishdx.com.
Yeah, and we'll make it happen. Okay, but let's get our guest on today. It's a third time for this.
Third time's the charm? No, the first time's the charm. That's why we had him back 2 more times.
Yeah. Have we had anyone else on 3 times?
I don't think so.
Okay, so this person is setting a record today.
Yep.
Amazing. All right. So this person, good friend of the podcast.
Yes.
He holds a master's and a PhD, overkill. in industrial organizational psychology. He is a repeat guest with this episode. Oh, I'm just reading what I've already said. His third appearance, where he joins us to talk about his annual burnout research. He is the Managing Director of Infinite Potential. Welcome back to the podcast, Dr. John Chen.
Thanks so much for having me again and again for the third time.
Yeah, no, it's all right. We will take anyone, really.
We love to make our guests feel very special, John.
If you need an external sort of person for your travel podcast, just let me know. I will definitely join you for that.
All right, listeners, make sure you ask for John Chen as well on the podcast when you email dan@flourishtx.com. Yeah, no, great to have you back on, John, and looking forward to talking about your latest iteration of your research.
So what podcast are you listening to?
This is probably a bit of a detriment to my own mental health, but I'm kind of a bit addicted to the news. So the podcasts I'm listening to are quite news specific. So the one I probably listen to the most is Pod Save America. So just listening to all of the stuff that's going on in the U.S. It's like a mix between like a crime podcast and a murder mystery and like a historical kind of podcast, all wrapped into one.
Does sound stressful, yeah.
It is not a relaxing type of podcast.
Yeah, and the thing that makes it really stressful is it's real life. It's not made up.
Well, that's it. Yeah, this is reality.
Yeah. Believe
it or not. All right, and so what have you been up to since last time we had you on?
So it's been a pretty interesting 12 months. So, after doing research and kind of talking about burnout for the last couple of years, we've been kind of starting to work with organizations about, so what is the answer to solving this problem? We know we want to address it, but it's more complicated than that. So kind of working with organizations to kind of design and kind of pilot new ways of working to kind of make work a lot more sustainable. And, these little workplace experiments that we're doing, it's just been so interesting. And I'm kind of learning so much from the teams I'm working with on what works, what doesn't work. A lot of times what we find in research, I was like, oh, this is probably the answer. No, it's not practical at all. And vice versa. Some of the stuff that we might seem like, oh, that wouldn't work. It actually does have a really big effect. So it's not always like these kind of grand kind of things. So little things can play a big part in kind of creating that much healthier kind of workplace. And besides that, so other than that, this might just be because I've been listening to podcasts and other stuff. There's sort of three really big questions that's just been, it just keeps showing up in the conversations I'm having or the research I'm reading, and it's all just kind of living in my mind, kind of rent-free there. And so the first one, it's not a big surprise. It's about burnout, and not burnout like the buzzword burnout. I'm so burnt out on boutique hipster homemade pickles or that kind of thing, but burnout as a systems failure and really getting to understand systems and how do we talk about systems and systems change to a much broader audience, because I think too many leaders out there are still thinking about it and treating burnout as sort of an individual issue. And so how do we get them to think a lot broader in that? And then the other thing really is just about productivity. That's the word I hear pretty much in every meeting that I'm at. And I can't tell you just how many times I hear someone say, well, with AI, we'll finally solve this productivity problem. And, I don't say this because, but I really want to say, last time I checked, most tech out there is just making people busier. We're not freeing any time for people. We're just beeping at them more and sending them more notifications. And, while we're kind of automating some of the tasks that they have to do, we're increasing these expectations too. Right, so we're saying, hey, now that you have AI or this new technology, this piece of work that might have taken you a day to do, you've got 3 hours to do it now. And so the deadlines, the job demands are increasingly higher. And so thinking about how do we get to a place where, even if we are creating more efficiencies, how do we save that for the people rather than just kind of adding more work to them?
It's a shocking premise, John. If we find efficiencies, let's give them back to the people instead of giving them to the employer.
Yeah, no, but we see that all the time where, people aren't just swayed by the moral argument of let's, make people's lives not shit. Let's, let's get as much productivity out of them as we can. And, if we harm them, so be it. It's really interesting that tension between productivity and health. Interested to explore that further with you, I guess, on today's podcast. But I guess for listeners who haven't listened to the previous episodes that you've been on, John, can you maybe just start with a brief overview of your research, how long you've been doing it for in this particular area and these reports that you've been doing and the methodology that you deploy?
Yeah, sure. So for the last 5 years, we've been leading a piece of research, a global piece of research to kind of better understand global trends, the causes, and sort of the impact of burnout. So we call it the State of Workplace Burnout. And we look at it in terms not about just the trends of burnout, but really how it relates to factors within the workplace, like engagement, productivity, well-being. And our goal is to kind of be able to provide insights to kind of help people and leaders really better understand and recognize and address kind of burnout. Because what we've been seeing out there, like I mentioned, people are still so focused on the individual, and a lot of times that's with good intent. This person is crying out for help. How can we help that person? But as we know, the burnout. People's been working on burnout for decades now, and it's not having the impact that it really should. And I think one of those is to help people better understand what are the root causes for that. And so this research is conducted through kind of pretty massive social media campaign. We've been lucky enough to kind of build really good relationships with partners who help us spread the word all across Australia, all around the world as well. And then we also have organizations that participate in the study as organizations. So to date, we've had over 10,000 respondents from over 40 different countries participate within the last 5 years.
Yeah, amazing. It'll be interesting to unpack today, I guess, the latest research with you. Where do you get most of your participation from, though, around the world in the research?
Probably the three main countries is kind of where you would expect: Australia, the UK, and the US. That probably makes up about 70%. Yeah,
terrific. And you do this with partners, right? I think I've seen there's. Yeah, it's not just John Chan running this, but there's other researchers involved in this research as well.
Yeah, that's right. We like partnering with peak bodies who have a lot of member organizations who are, especially those who are, this is a big issue for the entire industry. So I think a lot in the community services sector, a lot in some of the high-tech sectors who burnout is a really big issue. They've been really helpful in getting this out there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, good to have friends.
Definitely. So what's the same and what's different this year round?
So after 5 years of data, it's really been fascinating to start seeing really clear trends and correlations between certain factors. If we're just looking at it from 1 year, maybe 2 years, it could just be a blip or some type of kind of a sampling difference there. But after 5 years, we're really seeing a really clear kind of messages. So in terms of what's similar, I think the core message there is still the same. Burnout is a systems issue. It's not a personal kind of failure. The data and insights are quite clear that organizational factors like workload, job demand, leadership, and team dynamics, those are the biggest drivers in burnout, whether somebody has or does not have burnout. And then we also continue to see this really clear link between well-being and productivity. It's not an either or. What we're seeing is, organizations really don't need to choose between, should we focus on productivity or should we focus on people's well-being? I think our data really clearly shows that they're the opposite sides of the same coin, right? They don't actually compete with each other. You don't have to make a choice between the two. They work in partnership. When you have people who are healthy, who are engaged, they are more productive. And on the same lines, we know that work is a determinant of health as well. When people feel engaged in what they do, they're sort of achieving and accomplishing things at work. That is part of their health and well-being as well. And so we're continuing to see that strong link there. And in terms of what's different this year, so this is one of our most, I think, interesting and controversial findings, which is the relationship between caring responsibilities and burnout. And so for the past 4 years, we found no difference in the rate of burnout between those with and without caring responsibilities. So that's quite controversial because everywhere you go, the media is saying, those with caring responsibilities are so much more burned out and they've got so much more stress. So that we did not find that. But this year, the data show that those without caring responsibilities actually has higher levels of burnout than those with caring responsibilities. And this is especially true for women. So women without caring responsibilities is the highest group. It's between sort of men and women, they are the highest group in terms of burnout rates.
So good thing you've got caring responsibilities, Joelle. It's a protective factor.
For burnout specifically.
Yeah,
yes.
For burnout specifically. That is quite an interesting finding. Any ideas on why that might be, John?
Yeah, we've been trying to unpack this for the last couple of years, and I think one of the things that keeps coming up is for those with caring responsibilities, you have a lot more kind of strict kind of guidelines that you need to work out your day. You can't just keep working, or you can't just you've got responsibilities. You need to pick up a child. You need to feed them, or you need to do things with like elderly parent, or whatever those responsibilities are. There is very little flexibility in those things. So you need to. Those are the times where you have to break away from work, and also when you have caring responsibilities, what we're told is you're much better at organizing your time. You can't just kind of flop around and go on these rabbit holes of things. Like you only have this amount of time to work, so they are much better at kind of focusing and getting their work done, and then going off and doing those caring responsibilities. And so I think those really become really good protective factors. And it is one thing that kind of gets mentioned when we talk to people a bit, which is, there's we talk a lot about, the stress and the exhaustion from caring, but there's a lot of positive things on there as well. When you're having a conversation with an elderly parent, or when you're playing with your child, like there's a lot of positive emotions that get created from that sometimes we might not talk about as much, and those are all really important kind of things.
Not to mention the positive benefits of watching Bluey with your kid.
Yeah, John doesn't watch Bluey. I had some pretty strong negative emotions yesterday when my kids would not get ready in time for school and miss the bus.
Oh.
But there are probably more good than bad, but it's not all good.
Sure.
No, definitely not. But we just hear about the bad. We never hear about, when they wake up and give you a cuddle, how great that is, and all the positive things out there.
Yeah, the little moments.
Yeah, so, and that was actually, my suspicion, John. I didn't want to put words into your mouth regarding why people with caring responsibilities may be experiencing less burnout than people without caring responsibilities, because you do have those enforced breaks with work life, right? So if we know that burnout is an occupational phenomenon, the less you're engaging at work, or if you've got these natural breaks where you actually have to go and attend to other responsibilities outside of work, then that should hopefully protect against burnout, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I know myself, for example, that, my wife expects me home at 5:30 most evenings for dinner. or to go and help take the kids to basketball and extracurricular activities and this sort of thing. So I know, like you say, you have to be more focused, get your work done. And Joelle laughs when I say have to be more focused. But
look, there's a butterfly.
Where? But getting things done in the time constraints that you've got, because you know that you have to leave at a certain time, and then you have that break between what you're thinking about at work and then going and switching into family mode.
And I think it's also that the focus of your thoughts is elsewhere as well, right? Because you could be physically not at work anymore, but still dwelling on thinking about sort of processing whatever problem you're working on at work. But when you do have those, especially active caring responsibilities, right, that you do actually need to be sort of mentally present and in the moment in a lot of those interactions. So it does actually take your brain also away from work.
Oh yeah, my son's just got his L plate, so
oh, no.
Yeah,
it's a different kind of stress.
Yeah, but you do have to focus and be in the moment.
I still remember on my L plates, my mum almost like stomping a hole through the floor of the car while she's like desperately stomping her brake foot, but it doesn't help because I'm the one who's got the brake pedal, not her. Yeah.
Yes.
And one other thing that we've been hearing from those without caring responsibilities that we've been asking, so, what's going on? One thing that we hear a lot, we don't have the data to back this up yet, but they're saying, they're picking up a lot of the slack that happens when people are going off to do their caring responsibilities. They're the only people left in the workplace, and they just assume, well, you got nothing else to do. Why don't you just pick up or finish this piece of work, or do all of these things? Like they get all these things added on to them just because they, people assuming, well, if you don't have caring responsibilities, you're flexible, and so I think that's not great, and I think that's more of a bigger societal kind of thing that we need to rethink.
Yeah, that definitely sucks.
So, John, what are the main trends coming out of the 2025 report then?
I think the biggest overall trend is, we've been looking at burnout, and it's been slowly increasing the last few years. Although the last couple of years, it's kind of plateaued at around 38% in terms of the number of people who are experiencing burnout. This year, for the first time ever, it's dropped a little bit. So it's gone from 38% to 35%. So that's great. Kudos. And same with sort of the measurement about sort of overall well-being. We've seen a really positive rise in overall well-being there. And that, like I mentioned earlier, we're starting to see this really clear trends that when people's well-being are going down, their levels of burnout is going up, or vice versa. So that's a really big trend that we're seeing. And in terms of what we've been looking at on what works. There are other kind of workplace trends that we've been kind of talking about quite a bit. The conversation about like the 4-day work week or 9-day fortnight, those kind of different types of work modalities. For the last couple of years, we've been kind of tracking organizations and people who are working in those different modalities and comparing them with everyone else who's working in a more normal type of modalities. And we see really clear trends there that the number of hours worked really has an effect on things like well-being or the likelihood of experiencing burnout. And the other kind of big workplace trends that we looked into was about the mandated days back in the office. That is just a conversation for so many organizations out there. Like, is it 3 days? Is it 2 days? Is it 5 days? But what we found is that 2 days was clearly had sort of the best in terms of its impact on individuals' well-being. But what we've found is that that's not the right conversation really to be having. Is it 2 days, 3 days? Organizations are different, sectors are different. Like, that shouldn't be the conversation. It's really the conversation that needs to be had within organizations is, what do you do when you're in the office versus what you do when you're not in the office. So when you're in the office, you have that, we're all in the office. We need to be a lot more intentional in the work that we're doing. those things that it's better when we're all together. Those kind of collaborating type of works where we're kind of sharing ideas, and also even kind of making those connections, grabbing a coffee and things like that. Nothing makes people feel worse than coming to the office after spending all that time and money, and you're just on Teams all day. Or you're so busy that when somebody says, "Hey, you want to grab lunch or grab a coffee?" you can't. I was like, "Why did I even come to the office?" If you said, a little leaders say, "Let's come in so we can like connect with each other." Like, I'm too busy with work, and so we really need to think about what is being done where.
Well, when you're really trying to focus on work and your boss rolls his chair across the room and crashes into you just for the lols.
Look, that happened once. Twice max. Yeah, I did learn quickly that you don't like that approach to management.
Sure.
I could write a book actually about unique approaches to management, I think. So.
Sure, you could, yeah. A book called Don't Do This?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't try this at work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the FlourishDX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow FlourishDX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the FlourishDX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
John, intersectionality was one of the main trends that was called out in the latest report. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, we really, we've been doing this for a while, and we've been wondering, a lot of organizations are doing quite a lot. They're putting, they're prioritizing people's well-beings and kind of mitigating burnout, but it's not having the impact, or not having as big of an impact as they would like to have. And we try to dig deeper into this issue. And so this year we looked at, we're really curious about intersectionalities and all of the different experiences or different masks that people, or the identities that people have when they come to the office. When you have this sort of one-size-fits-all type of initiatives for well-being, things like that, a lot of times we see that isn't working, and we just want to kind of see if that is the case. And there's a lot out there about looking at intersectionality, looking at diversity, and we really want to prove that this is not about dividing people. We're not trying to say, oh, this group is special and we need to give them like special privileges or anything like that. It's really trying to understand what is the full picture of the workforce that you have, and so that we can build the type of workplaces where everyone is performing at a really high level, and just better understanding how to do that. And so that's sort of the reason that we're looking at that. And we found some really interesting kind of data in, for example, when you just look at the difference between burnout rates for men versus women, for example, it's 32% for men, 38% for women. But then if you add in another layer and you look at women with who identify as having a disability, that jumps from 38 to 65% in terms of the population. And so, and none of these groups are a monolith. So men are not, women are not. And it's just trying to show that we need to be much more tailored in some of these solutions that we have out there. That this one-size-fits-all thing isn't going to work.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the whole point of talking about intersectionality, right? Is that there are different aspects of life that intersect with each other to impact our experiences. So looking at those combinations, we can actually get better insights into the needs of different cohorts within our workplace or within our community.
Yeah. I've seen Rob Briner being on a bit of a tear about this recently. We're looking at generational differences and trying to go like, this generation needs this, or this is how you manage this generation. Like talking about...
Yeah, it's mostly age, right?
Yeah.
It's not generation, it's age and stage of life.
Yeah, but then there's differences, right? Like, not everyone who was born in the same year expects the same or will work in the same sort of style. So, yeah. Anyway. Yes, we can learn a lot more by consulting with people and understanding their various needs rather than just treating them all the same, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. So productivity was the big one, and that's a newer area, right, John? That's been included in this year's report. It'd be good to deeper dive into that one with you.
Yeah. This year's report really all kind of wraps around productivity because that is on everyone's mind, especially leaders out there, both kind of organizational leaders, political leaders out there. It's all about productivity. How do we improve productivity? And what we've been collecting this data for the last 5 years in terms of the well-being piece, but also about how well or how productive do you feel you are? And we really, again, see a really clear trend of when people report that their well-being is dropping, their productivity drops, and vice versa. In this last year, we saw an increase in people saying that they have been more productive in the past 12 months, and at the same time indicating that their well-being has improved as well. And as we kind of went through the data, we found that the three factors that really drive productivity is mitigating burnout. So burnout is such a big factor in if somebody is productive or not. The second one is psychological safety. This was a huge factor when we kind of developed that model for productivity. Those who are feeling psychologically safe in their workplace, they were 2.5 times more likely to report being more productive in the past 12 months. And finally, the third one that we looked at was trust as well, which is a new area that we've looked into this year. So we know, globally, there's a big erosion of trust in organizations, in governments, in the media, in science, and worst of all, in each other. And so we wanted to see how that influenced the workplace as well. And what we found was that was also another really big factor that was driving productivity.
Yeah, so you're saying that if we, like people who are more productive also have high levels of well-being. Do we know what direction that is? So if you're productive, does that then make you have high levels of well-being? Or if you have high levels of well-being, you become more productive?
We don't have the direction on that one. We know it's pretty highly kind of correlated, but in terms of which one affects each other, we don't have that.
Yeah, so the trust one is interesting, right? So there's like psychological safety, which is certainly about trust, but that's more like within the team level, right? So it sounds like the trust that you're talking about there is more like trust in institutions and sort of that sort of thing. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. What we found was most people still have really high trust in their direct manager. So we're seeing that over 64% still have high trust in their manager. But that number really decreases to under 50% when we ask them, how much do you trust your organization? Sort of, I think the exact question is, I trust that my organization will act in the best interest of its employees. There's a huge, a really big drop in that. And then when we kind of split that out by job level, it gets even kind of really obvious. The further away you are from the top, the less trusting you are of the organization. So when those in the kind of senior leader, executive kind of level, their trust in organization is around 78%. So really high trust because it's mainly them. But then when you go all the way down to those individual contributors, we're looking at about 48% who trust organizations. And so, taking a step back, if you have less than half of your organization really trust the things that you're doing as an organization, that really affects kind of productivity. we've seen some really kind of clear kind of correlations with that. Because, after all, if you don't trust your organization because you've had years of downsizing, you've got all of these constant organizational changes, all of these things happening, you're not going to come in and like try to be the most productive that you can be.
Yeah, and that's kind of a lot to do with psychological contract there, right? Like, why would I go above and beyond when I know that that's not going to be reciprocated, or where I expect that that's not going to be reciprocated? Was there any relationship between, or was the type of organization, did that have any bearing on that level of trust? Like if it was a publicly listed versus a privately owned, and like size of the business as well?
Yes, we did look at 3 categories. So we had the just kind of for-profit commercial organizations. We had government, NGO type of organization, and we had sort of community services, charities type of organization. This is where it gets quite interesting in trust. Like the commercial or for-profit organizations actually has pretty high levels of trust, even higher than the community services, and like that just didn't really make sense. And when we talked to, so after this, we kind of have focus groups and we kind of talk to people like, why do you think this is happening? Some of the answers we got was like, we already expect, some of these big organizations, they're not that trustworthy. Like we know what we're getting when you go work for a, let's say large kind of global organization. You know what to expect, versus when you work in a smaller community services sector, you have really high expectations of how things should work. And when there's a sort of misalignment or a mismatch in your experience versus what you were expecting, that's a much bigger drop in sort of trust. And that sort of kind of explains, or that's how they were explaining why those might have been the results.
Right. So you knew that it was a scorpion that you were inviting onto your back all along with the for-profit organisation, and you didn't realise it was a scorpion when it was the community organisation. Yeah.
So, John, the last topic, I guess, that you really focused on this report was around distraction and loneliness. So tell us about that theme.
Yeah, so we wanted to kind of expand our thinking and what else is going on that might be having effect on burnout. And so the first one that we looked at was what we call sort of the distracted worker. And so as we all know, the pace and complexity of work is just continuing to accelerate. Now, the amount of information we need to absorb and use for most people just continues to rise. And we have so many kind of distractions, not just in work, but at home, globally, there's all this stuff, and that's kind of creating this kind of mental overload within sort of all of us. And when that happens, it's just like having way too many tabs open on your browser. Everything just kind of starts slowing down. And what we're seeing, and we really want to look at if that was sort of, well, first of all, true, but also what effects that has on individuals and the workplace. And so what we saw was about 16% of this year's participants are in that sort of highly distracted a group where sometimes you don't even know how you got to the office or how you got home. You just know, at one moment I was at home, now I'm in the office. Like you just are so distracted about and thinking about so many different things. So for that 16%, they are much more highly likely to be experiencing burnout. Over 55% of them reported being less productive. And this is quite interesting too. A lot of them, more than a quarter, experience or report experiencing loneliness in the workplace too. Whether they're using all of these distractions as a sort of way out, or if this is actually distracting them from making real connections in the workplace. So whatever direction that is, there is definitely an effect in this population who are highly distracted. And I think as we look into this more, I think we will find that those who are highly distracted, they're going to be much more likely to make mistakes, and which will then kind of cause them to have to do more work. All of those kind of things is something that I think a lot of organizations really need to kind of think about as a hazard. How much are you putting on to your people about that? The other point is about loneliness, and this is something that we started looking at last year, and because we see that that the trends with loneliness, it is growing quite quickly all around the world as well, and we wanted to kind of have a look again about the importance of having that social connection in the workplace and how that relates to things like productivity, engagement. Productivity and engagement. So what we found was about 27% of our sample, and so these are all sort of the working population, are experiencing loneliness in the workplace. And and for those who are experiencing loneliness in the workplace, they're much more likely to indicate that they have been less productive, that their well-being has been lower, and also they're much more likely to report that they're looking for another job as well. And from the sort of so those are sort of individual points, but from the organization sort of point of view as well, this is why leaders need to pay attention. This could be that canary in the coal mine when people are starting to feel lonely within the workplace. That could be the sign of something else kind of going on. What we found was that those who are experiencing loneliness, 63% of them, actually those who are not experiencing loneliness, 63% of them feel that they're better supported by their organization. They experience a much higher level of belonging within the organization. They've got a 33% higher rate of engagement when they're not experiencing this. And they also had a 33% sort of higher in their sense of psychological safety in the workplace as well. So, we're trying to place all of these kind of elements together. One of the things that we're really trying to find is, what are some of these kind of leading indicators that could lead to some of these factors, rather than waiting for engagement and things like that, which is a little bit of a lagging indicators. Can we find things out there that can maybe predict some of these other factors?
Yeah, interesting. So it's good to have friends. Is the summary of that, like at work?
Yes, it's good to have be intentional about it. I think what the main thing that I was really surprised at this. I thought sort of that social connection, the team connection, that would be sort of the biggest driver for whether you experience loneliness or not. But interestingly, what we found was workload was the top one. When you're too busy to actually make those connections, when you're too busy to have coffee and grab lunch with your coworkers, in terms of the workplace part of it, that's the biggest driver for that, of creating loneliness. And once that happens, all of these it plants the seed for so much other bad things happening.
Yeah, you get that sort of vicious cycle happening then as well, right? Where people sort of perceive you as being disinterested or unapproachable, so they stop inviting you to stuff, and then maybe there's resentment that builds up because you're seeing them all going off and doing things together without you, and so that would then compound those feelings of loneliness as well, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It sounds like you've experienced that before, Joelle.
No. No. I always have loads of friends at work, Jason.
Sure. John, any thoughts in summary of your research? It's always one that we look out for every year. Really interested to see the trends, how it changes, and also some of these new areas that you're investigating every year as well.
Oh, thanks. We love doing this. It's my opportunity to really nerd out on kind of asking these questions that's in my head all the time, and actually try to get some answers for that.
Yeah, and working with some pretty big data sets as well, right? Yeah, no, fantastic. So, John, we ask this question every time you're on. I should really go back and listen to your previous two responses, and we can just splice it in maybe rather than asking it a third time.
You're not going to do that.
No, we're not going to do that. It's too much work. John, what are your hopes for the future of workplace mental health?
I think my hope is that we stop treating workplace mental health like it's some type of perk or some type of entitlement for that we give to our workers. Like we are so nice that we're going to help you with your mental health. Mental health at work is not just about supporting people when they're struggling. I think we need to change our mindset that it's about designing work so people can thrive and they can be productive and they don't need to recover from their work week. And so it's about sort of building that kind of environment to be so that everyone can be productive, rather than keeping that focus on its individual mental health that we're helping. And the shift that I'm really passionate about, and hoping that it happens, that it's also is that workplace mental health, it's not HR's job, it's not work health and safety's job, right? It is leadership's job. Every team leader, every executive, when you're the person who's able to shape the workload or the work demand and timelines, you're actually shaping people's mental health by how you're doing that. And so whether they realize that or not, or that's something that we need to make sure they realize, it's not a nice to do. It's that's your job, to being a good leader and looking after your people. All of those things need to be in consideration.
I really like that. Yeah, because I think we all know it, right? Like if you improve people's experience of work, that will have direct mental health benefits. But I think leaders probably need that reminder. They don't need to be a psychologist or a counsellor. Just by doing their job and making work good for the people that they supervise, that will have direct mental health benefits as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We hear that quite a lot. It's like, oh, well, I can't do anything about people's mental health because I'm not a psychologist or I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained for that. Bringing up this conversation more that in your everyday job when you're giving people work, that is shaping people's mental health. I think that's a really important thing we can get out there.
Yep, and it is literally your job as a leader to do that stuff well. So if you haven't been trained in that, then probably your organisation isn't doing the right thing by you. Yep. Last question for you today, John, and again the same one that we always ask at the end of every episode. Parting words of advice for listeners who are interested in working in the field of psych health and safety.
This is kind of a bit of a journey that I've been going through myself as well, which is like if we want to make real impact and get people's attention. So the advice or what I've been trying to do is really learn the language of your audience. As we're talking on this podcast, we might speak one particular language, but if we're talking to senior leaders out there, we need to know the language that they understand and that they care about. So it's not enough really to be right or to sort of have the right intent. Like you got to be heard at the end of the day, and to be heard, you need to talk about things that your audience care about. So for senior leaders, that usually means one of three things: either improving productivity or revenue, reducing costs, or mitigating risk. If you can connect workplace mental health and safety to one of those three levers, and ideally all three, then you'll stop being seen as, oh, it's that well-being person or it's that HR person coming again, and you'll actually start being seen as sort of a strategic partner that's helping me with my own kind of business goals. So don't talk about or try, depending on the audience, don't talk about burnout. Talk about productivity, talk about attrition, talk about psychosocial legislation that you need to comply with, and don't talk about well-being either. Talk about how it's a performance accelerator. We want to be more productive. This is how we do it, and really be able to show that healthier team are more productive and they're more innovative and they're more resilient.
Yeah, building it back on the mental models that are already present in the audience, and wherever possible tying it in with the pain points of the business is definitely good advice.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about it more and more, and I think we're going to have to do a webinar on this soon, Joelle, I find a lot of HR practitioners they're scared of using the term risk. I mean, we hear it all the time in our customers where they're like, can we not call it a risk assessment? Can we call it a wellbeing survey? But that really dilutes the messaging. And, you often hear from HR, they want a seat at the table. Well, if they want a seat at the table, they have to talk in the language of the C-suite and the board, which is one of those that you mentioned, is risk. So it's probably better to steer into that rather than, steering away from it and diluting it and making it something that, then requires a translation piece when, communicating that with leadership. So, I think that's probably something we need to start encouraging HR practitioners to do, to steer towards risk.
It's really easy to dismiss, right? Like the things that they either don't understand fully or that they just kind of don't like well-being. It's really easy for them to dismiss that. But when you talk about this is a performance accelerator, this is something that will create high performance in the organization, they can't say no to that.
Yeah, reducing costs, improving revenue, reducing risk, those three things in particular. Yeah. No, all good, John. Hey, John, always a pleasure having you on the podcast. We're looking forward to having you back in 2026 and unpacking the 6th iteration of your report. So thanks for being a friend of the podcast. And hopefully see you at PHSCon next month.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John. Well, listeners, that brings us to the end of this episode. Remember, we do record these over video when we have our guests on. Even John forgot about this bit. We do have the video on the FlourishDX YouTube page, so check out all of our previous guests on the videos there. We also take snippets of these videos and put them on the FlourishDX LinkedIn page, so make sure you're following along there to get all of the greatest insights from these conversations directly in your inbox. And then while you're on LinkedIn, do connect with Joelle and myself if you want to continue the conversation, and reach out to John if you want further information on his research. But thanks a lot again, listeners. We'll catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow FlourishDX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.